The initial thought I had when I started watching Jujutsu Kaisen was, oh, this is like if Bleach's animation had been nice. This is well designed. This is cool. All of the urban environmental details that make up the setting, the concrete, the glass, the loving depiction of a slightly decrepit middle school, the focus on bike racks and playgrounds and small patches of grass next to pavement. All of that is cool. That's why it's there, right? All of that makes the curses seem even more vivid. A setting defines the stakes of a shonen. In Bleach, Karakura Town is ordinary, and then you get a peek past the curtain to the hollows, the Shinigami, and that, too, is ordinary. Ichigo meets Rukia and is informed that she is doing important but low-level work. It's important that someone is doing it, but the Shinigami world doesn't consider aiding the human world to be a high priority or a high-risk activity. It's scut work. If she fails, if she dies, then that would be a very small-scale loss, a personal tragedy. Even if half of all Soul Society suddenly died, they would still have the numbers to keep their society running. We get an illusion of this with Yuji's introduction, but it's just that, an illusion that the sorcerers cling to. There are less than 40 sorcerers for all of Japan. They generally consider a fast response to a curse to mean only a few people died before they got there. And by a few people, they mean a few dozen people. The world of Jujutsu Kaisen is teetering over an abyss, and is single-handedly prevented from falling in by one 28-year-old man. In Greek myth, Atlas is commonly portrayed as a titan who was punished by Zeus and forced to hold up the sky. He tries to refuse, and in the Trials of Heracles, is further portrayed as willing to use trickery to try and get out from such an awful weight. So calling Gojo Atlas would be deeply imprecise. No one forced Gojo to do that. No one in the world is strong enough to put chains on him that would make him hold up the world. The man wearing Geto's face gives a short summary of Gojo's exploitable weaknesses. I'll list them here. He's unwilling to kill large amounts of civilians. He's grief-stricken over his friend's death. There. 2 weaknesses. These are the weaknesses that force him to shoulder the sky. Oh, here's a third. He finds human life to be valuable. It's worth holding up the sky because helping people live is a worthy deed. I like that the Season 2 anime starts with the flashback, that it shows Gojo and Geto in the positions and morals that they used to have. Gojo is inherently detached from humanity, unable to connect to it nor understand it, while Geto is forced to swallow it down. He eats human misery. He devours sin. The curses of the world stay within him. The curses of the world lurk within his skin. The difference in perception comes from sacrifice. Namely, Gojo doesn't see himself as sacrificing anything to be a sorcerer. He is what he is, and he does what he does. How can something be a sacrifice when it's so easy? The fraying fabric of civilization? It's not a concern, and will never be a concern for as long as he lives. But for Geto, it's not like that. The flaws of the system are obvious and worsening. Sorcerers are treated poorly and asked to do an absurd amount of work, and their only reward will be more work because they are treating the symptoms of a worsening disease. Gojo's answer to this, that as long as he's around, the world could be as sick as it wants because it will never die, is horrifying to someone who will be forced to eat that sickness. This doesn't mean that Geto's solution wasn't dumb as hell. Curses are stronger now than ever before because humans are more miserable than ever before. Curse power comes from despair. Gojo's existence as the hope of the world is fueled by the despair of sorcerers. He can only be strong because he was born into such misery, even if it's not misery he can feel. So, Geto's solution, eradicate humanity and thus eradicate despair, is meaningless. This is just another word for oblivion. He's just gotten tired of losing. This world hurts him to live in, so he can't stand it, so he dies. He wanted Gojo to understand him, but even as Gojo gained an understanding of what it meant to be a human who loses things and is hurt, what Gojo decided was that he had a responsibility to protect the words of his former friend, that what he valued was the beliefs that Geto had used to have. And Geto dies with a bitter smile on his face, quiet and sad. And then his corpse stands back up. That even all the goodness in which I lived my life could be overwritten easily, said by Erika Furuta of Umineko fame. In her context, she's talking about how, when you reveal a negative fact about someone, that new knowledge stains everything else you've known about that person, tainting their legacy. That an action that had been done with good intent could be blackened at any moment by someone looking back from the future, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's a quote I thought about when I watched Sukuna kill Geto's girls. Rescuing them is one of the things that pushes him, that gives him an example of the awfulness humanity is capable of, and they remain the only non-cursed members of Geto's inner circle. A representation of what he actually wants, which is the ability to save people. With their death, all that effort falls apart. Why did he do all that? He failed to save the girl, too. His only duty was to stop her assassination, and he failed. It becomes an endless question. Gojo restrained himself so that he wouldn't kill the 400 civilians in that subway station, and yet a lot of them died anyway. Why not just give up? The heartbeat of the Jujutsu Kaisen world is failure. Failure and subway stations. It's important that he's not failing to fight someone in another world of endless sand and night. That he's not losing these fights in a forest that goes on forever. That Gojo is losing in this subway station. That Yuji is fighting in a bathroom. That Megumi is getting smeared across the pavement of a crosswalk. It's good fight design. It's cool. But what makes Shibuya interesting is not just all this, but the fact that unlike most incidents, they haven't been able to evacuate any civilians. Sukuna's fight could have been completely empty, just him fighting a curse that's never been seen before and won't be seen again for quite some time. But it can't be empty, because every time Sukuna hits a building, you have to think, there were probably people still in there. Isn't that fun? The world is killing them. not individual opponents. The urban world itself has become their enemy. The despair born from this concrete city is the racked coughs and bloodied lips of the world. So let's go back to the subway. Gojo has made the call that he's not willing to kill every person in the area just to take out some high-powered curses. Now, he makes this call before he feels threatened. He is not, at any point, forced to choose between himself dying and anyone in the crowd. This is him deciding if he's going to let his opponents live. The curse wearing Geto's body uses that to weaponize the second weakness, the fact that Gojo will stop and consider Geto's existence, that he will care. He does care, and more than that, Geto cares. The soul gone, but the body remains. The corpse still loves. There's a lot of corpses walking around the streets in Shibuya, and not all of them are curses. There's Geto, there's Toji, there's Nanami, who stalked down street after street with half of his face melted off, overwhelmed with longing for a world outside the city. Mekamaru dies before even getting to the city. But still, from beyond the grave, he offers aid. For much of the arc, we are receiving exposition from a dead man who's quietly overwhelmed with regret. Why did he try so hard to fight Mahito? Why did he have a crush that would make him sad to die? Nanami wonders why he kept going. Thinks about how if he had only quit his job, he could have had a good life. But his last regret isn't any of that. He's apologetic that he has to leave the burden to Yuji. He regrets not that he didn't retire, but that he couldn't have done more. Nobara's last words come from the fact that her regret is not coming to Shibuya, not venturing down into B5, but a failure to keep a promise to a girl from her hometown. If only she had been able to shoulder more of the weight of the world. Toji is free of this sorrow. In direct contrast to Geto's premise that the soul overwrites the body, Toji declares that his body is stronger than any soul. He doesn't need to follow orders. He doesn't need to do anything. But what does a corpse like him do with ultimate freedom? It appears that in his moment of freedom, he goes hunting, kills a dangerous cursed spirit, hones in on the fact that Megumi is using a Zenin clan technique, and aims for him next. All until he sees Megumi's face. Toji is notoriously kind of a shit parent. He was going to sell Megumi to his clan, he was kind of forgetful that he even had 2 kids, and his priorities were simple and straightforward. Kill people and gamble, gamble and kill people.
全員じゃねえのか。よかったな。
If Toji were interested in taking responsibility, he would have stuck around. Maybe Megumi would never have gotten smeared on the pavement by a curse with a luck ability, because Toji would protect him from that. But Toji's not interested in having a son, though. Toji's happiness comes from this one moment of realization. Oh, I didn't die for nothing. Gojo followed through. My last whim carried power beyond the grave. It doesn't matter to Toji if Megumi dies 5 minutes later, because what was important was all the years he'd had outside of the clan. In a world where Megumi was doomed in every circumstance, Gojo has distorted the world to grant him a childhood. That is the type of thing that elevates someone to the rank of Titan. Gojo's distortion of the world, actually, is its own fascination. By holding up the world, he is, in fact, damaging it. His enemies are forced to escalate to unthinkable levels in order to have a chance against him, leaving all of the weaker sorcerers in his shadow to face an onslaught not meant for them. Or at least, that's one perspective. Another could be that since the Jujutsu Kaisen world was doomed before Gojo was ever born, maybe all he's done is speed up the inevitable end. That all the good I've done in the world can be erased so easily. Gojo's sealing brought ruination upon the world he sought to save. But more importantly, it meant that he could not keep promises that he had made. Yuji is allowed to live because Gojo promised that he would simply take care of it if Sukuna got out. And Gojo has done this with lots of people, made promises that no one else on Earth would dare to make, has sealed horror after horror into Pandora's box and said that it needs no further lock than his very existence. Unfortunately, the monsters have pushed him into the box as well. They've pushed hope into the box, and they locked it. Was Gojo unwise to make so many promises? To say that it was alright to live because he'd take care of it? Wouldn't it have been better if he'd just killed all those people in the subway? Because his continued existence was more important than they were. If he'd tried to carry less, if he had put down Geto's ideals for even 1 second, he could have continued to hold the sky up forever. Sukuna would have been unable to shatter a single high-rise, let alone turn a 140-meter radius part of the city into nothing but smoldering rubble. But to do that would be to erase the very good that Geto offered the world. Gojo can't do it. Death is ringing in Yuji's ears by the time he makes it to the climax of the Shibuya arc. He's lost friends, he's lost mentors, he's lost control, and he's even lost a very brutal fight. What were my brother's last words? He's asked. And Yuji says, they didn't say anything, but they cried. There's a lot of ways of saying that Yuji isn't at fault for anything Sukuna does. And it's true, he isn't. But Yuji has done plenty of things worth struggling over. He has plenty of things to regret. But what makes Yuji stand out among the sorcerers of Jujutsu Kaisen is this struggle. That he can't accept that death is everywhere. That this job is a death sentence. That he doesn't want to die. That he holds the expectation that all of his friends will live. That is not something that anyone else does. It makes him easy to hurt. It makes him easy to manipulate. It makes him easy to like. That's why Gojo likes him. Yuji doesn't want to die alone. But in the ruins of Sukuna's domain, that's all that he sees. Loneliness. A world where no one lives except for him. And that's why Gojo decided that it was fine to give up. That he'd let the world die because he didn't want to kill civilians. A shattered urban landscape where no one lives except for him. You should at least curse me at the end, right? Gojo will never erase Geto's good deeds from the world. He'd rather his own be erased instead. Pretty cool. I'm Zarinthel, and this is my channel where I talk about anime, video games, and now even visual novels. Thanks for watching!